Danielle Krasnicki says she remembers the last time she saw and talked to Roa Aldanoon. Roa, or Lulu as she liked to be called, was Krasnicki's employee here at Aladdin's in Lakewood.
She just kept communicating with me on how she has her own life now and she's going to work really hard to take care of her son and provide a nice home and a nice life for him and get him in school and activities.
Danoon was recently divorced from Fahad Mohammed Saeed. She would go missing a short time later.
Not all monsters hide in the dark. Sometimes they walk among us, blending so seamlessly into everyday life that their true nature remains concealed until it's too late. On a quiet October evening in Lakewood, Ohio, 24-year-old Roa S. Aldanoon was going about her usual routine. She was a devoted mother, a hard-working woman trying to secure a better future for herself and her 3-year-old son. But by the next morning, something was terribly wrong. Roa was gone. No warnings, no signs of struggle, no goodbyes. Her phone fell silent, her apartment undisturbed, except for her absence. Friends and family called, desperate to reach her, but every attempt led to the same dead end. Panic set in. Roa would never leave her son behind. Something had happened. Something sinister. But where was she, and who was responsible? As the days passed, worry turned into dread. The people who loved Roa demanded answers, and investigators quickly set their sights on one man. Someone who had once promised to love and protect her. Someone who, beneath the surface, was capable of something far darker. Fahad Mohammed Saeed was no stranger to Roa's life. He had been a central figure in it. A man she once trusted but later feared. Their relationship had been over for some time, yet his presence still loomed like a shadow she couldn't escape. Even after she broke free, he refused to let go. And now, with Roa missing, all eyes turned to him. But Fahad was confident. Too confident. He denied everything, weaving a story of innocence, of detachment, of a man with nothing to hide. He spoke as if Roa's disappearance was just another unfortunate mystery, as if she had simply walked away. And for a while, it almost seemed like he had gotten away with it. There were no immediate signs of foul play, no body, no crime scene that pointed directly to him. Authorities faced a frustrating silence, a puzzle with too many missing pieces. But what Fahad didn't know was that the truth always finds a way to the surface. In the weeks that followed, cracks began to form in his carefully constructed lies. Investigators dug deeper, sifting through surveillance footage, phone records, and digital footprints, piecing together a version of events that Fahad never wanted the world to see. And then, a chilling discovery changed everything. A grim revelation that confirmed what everyone feared but dared not say aloud. Roa hadn't simply vanished. She had been taken, and the person responsible believed he had committed the perfect crime. This is the chilling case of Fahad Mohammed Saeed. Roa S. Aldanoon had come to the United States in search of a new beginning. At just 24 years old, she had already endured more hardship than most experience in a lifetime. Born and raised in Iraq, she had witnessed the instability and dangers of war-torn life. But through it all, she had remained resilient. She wanted a future free of fear, a place where she and her young son could thrive, and for a time it seemed like she had found it. Settling in Lakewood, Ohio, Roa built a quiet, hard-working life for herself. She found a job at Aladdin's restaurant, where she spent long hours in the kitchen, pouring her energy into the work. She wasn't just another employee. Her colleagues adored her. They spoke of her warmth, her kindness, and how her eyes always lit up when she talked about her 3-year-old son. She was a mother first, before anything else. No matter how tired she was, no matter how demanding life became, her child was at the center of her world. But what her co-workers didn't see, what few people truly understood, was the dark shadow looming over her life. Because Roa wasn't just working for a better future, she was running from her past. Behind closed doors, she lived in fear. Her ex-husband Fahad Mohammed Saeed was the reason. Fahad was 26 years old, a man she had once loved, a man who had once promised her the kind of life she had longed for, but love had turned into something else, something dangerous. Their relationship had been volatile, filled with explosive fights, jealous rages, and controlling behavior. And, even after it was over, it was never really over. Roa had tried to escape him. She had fought to break free. She had even filed a restraining order, desperately trying to put legal distance between herself and the man who had made her feel like a prisoner in her own life. But restraining orders are just pieces of paper, and Roa knew that better than anyone. She had seen the way Fahad looked at her, the way he spoke to her, the way his anger simmered just beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to erupt. He was possessive, a man who refused to accept that she was no longer his. To him, she was still his wife. To him, she was still his to control. Rora did everything she could to protect herself. She avoided unnecessary contact with Fahad. She focused on her job, on her son, on moving forward. But moving forward is difficult when someone is constantly watching you from the past. And the most chilling part? Rora knew something was coming. She had confided in a friend that she felt unsafe, that she worried Fahad would never truly leave her alone. She had seen the warning signs, the calls, the messages, the looming presence that never seemed to fade. She just didn't know when it would happen. She didn't know how. All she knew was that Fahad wasn't done with her yet. And soon everyone else would know it too. It started with silence. Rora was always responsive, if not immediately then within minutes. She had people who cared about her, people who checked in, people she never left waiting. But on the night of October 16, 2016, something changed. Messages went unanswered. Calls rang and rang before going to voicemail. At first there was confusion. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she had fallen asleep. Maybe she was caught up with her son. But as the minutes stretched into hours, unease began to creep in. By the following morning, unease had turned into fear. Roa's friends tried reaching her again, but her phone was off. Not out of battery, not in a place with bad reception, just off, as if someone had deliberately made sure it would never ring again. This wasn't like her. She wasn't the kind of person to go off the grid, not when she had a young child, a job, and a life that depended on her being present. Her family in Iraq grew worried. Calls were made, messages were sent, but there was nothing. And then came the realization that sent a chill through everyone who knew her. Roa was gone. The last confirmed sighting of her had been at her apartment on Edgewater Drive. She had spoken to a friend earlier in the day. She had gone about her usual routine. There was nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing to suggest that, in just a few hours, she would simply vanish. The fear turned into action. A missing person report was filed, and from that moment on, the search for Roa began. It didn't take long for investigators to zero in on one name, a name that had haunted Roa's life for years: Fahad Mohammed Saeed. To everyone who knew the situation, it was the most obvious place to start. The ex-husband with a violent past, the man who had ignored the restraining order, the man who had refused to let her go. If anyone had a reason to want Roa gone, it was him. But when police questioned Fahad, he was calm. Too calm. He denied everything. He had nothing to do with her disappearance, he insisted. He had been home. He had no reason to hurt her. His answers were measured, practiced, controlled, as if he had thought through every possible question before they were even asked. But detectives had seen this before. They had seen men like Fahad, men who believed they were smarter than the system, men who thought they could out-talk, out-maneuver, outlast an investigation. They weren't convinced, because something wasn't right. Fahad's history with Roa spoke for itself. The restraining order, the threats, the uninvited appearances at her home and workplace, it all pointed in one direction. He had been obsessed with her, and when obsession turns into desperation, the results are almost always the same. But there was no body. There was no crime scene. There was nothing to prove what had happened. Roa had simply vanished. No struggle, no sign of forced entry, no distress call. It was as if she had been erased overnight, her presence wiped clean from the world. But the people who loved her refused to believe she had left willingly. She would never abandon her son. She would never walk away from the life she had fought so hard to rebuild. Something had happened to Roa, and someone knew exactly what it was. But knowing and proving it were two very different things. With no body and no physical evidence tying anyone to Roa's disappearance, investigators faced an uphill battle. They needed something, anything, that could crack this case wide open. And so, they started looking deeper. They retraced Roa's last known steps. They scoured surveillance footage from nearby streets and businesses. They searched through her phone records, trying to find the last messages she had sent, the last calls she had made. But no matter where they looked, Roa was simply gone. That's when authorities started focusing on Fahad's movements that night. Where had he been? Who had he spoken to? One name kept coming up. A man who had no real reason to be involved, but had somehow placed himself in the middle of everything. Amar Sami. He was 21 years old, a friend of Fahad's. On the surface, he seemed uninvolved, just another young man with no apparent connection to Roa's disappearance. But when detectives brought him in for questioning, something felt off. At first, Amar claimed he had been alone on the night of October 16. He had spent the evening by himself, doing nothing of importance. It was an airtight alibi, or so he thought. Because the police had already seen the surveillance footage. They had watched as Amar and Fahad walked into a local store together on the night Roa disappeared. The timestamps didn't lie. He had been with Fahad when he claimed he was alone. So why did he lie? That single deception changed everything. The police pressed him harder. Where had they gone after the store? What had they done? But Amar, despite being caught in a lie, refused to give up any real answers. That only made the detectives more determined. If Fahad had help, then this wasn't just a crime of passion, it was planned. And if it was planned, then somewhere, buried beneath the layers of secrecy, there had to be proof. So they started looking at Fahad's digital footprint. They searched his phone, his computer, his online activity, anything that could give them a window into his mind in the days leading up to Roa's disappearance. And what they found was chilling. Fahad had been searching for ways to dispose of a body. Step by step, his internet history painted a disturbing picture. How to make someone disappear. How to hide evidence. How to clean up a crime scene. It was all there. Every search, every visit to a crime forum, every disturbing query, it all pointed to one conclusion. Fahad had been planning this for a while. But knowing his intent wasn't enough. They still needed to prove what had happened to Roa. Where had Fahad taken her? Had Amar helped him? And most importantly, was Roa still out there? Her family clung to hope, but as the days turned into weeks and the weeks stretched into months, reality became harder to ignore. Roa would never have willingly disappeared. She would never have abandoned her son. Deep down, those who knew her best feared the truth, that somewhere, out there, her body lay hidden, waiting to be found. Investigators, however, refused to let the case go cold. They knew Fahad was responsible. Every piece of circumstantial evidence pointed directly at him. But without a body, without undeniable proof of Road's fate, the case remained frustratingly open-ended. If you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe button and be part of the conversation where we dig deep into the most shocking and mysterious cases together. Months passed, the seasons changed, and then, in May 2017, 7 months after Roa vanished, a break finally came. A team of investigators had been combing through a wooded area along Big Creek in Brooklyn, Ohio. It wasn't random. They had received a tip that this location might hold secrets buried beneath the earth. Whether it was a hunch, an anonymous lead, or something more concrete, The authorities knew this place needed to be searched. Cadaver dogs were brought in, trained to pick up the scent of human decomposition. The moment the dogs arrived, their behavior shifted. Their noses twitched, their bodies tensed. They had caught the scent of something, someone. The search team pressed forward, following the dog's lead, their footsteps crunching against damp leaves and broken twigs. Then they saw it. A container, partially buried, its surface covered with dirt and debris, as if someone had tried to erase its existence. With each careful movement, investigators unearthed more of the container, the weight of their discovery settling over them like a shadow. They knew what they would find inside, but nothing could prepare them for the horror of actually seeing it. The lid was pried open. The stench hit them first, a sickening confirmation that this was no ordinary container. And then, there she was. Human remains. Badly decomposed, unrecognizable at first glance, but in their hearts, everyone knew who had just been found. Ru'a, a young mother stolen from her son, a woman who had fought so hard for a new life, only to have it brutally taken from her. The news spread quickly. Roa's family had been waiting for months, caught in a limbo of hope and dread, praying for her safe return while fearing the worst. When the call came, there were no more illusions left to cling to. Roa wasn't missing anymore. She was gone. And now it was time for justice. With the discovery of her body, the investigation accelerated. The authorities already had their prime suspect, Fahad. They had been watching him, waiting for the moment when they could finally bring him down. Now, with Rua's remains as evidence, the noose was tightening around him. The pressure wasn't just on Fahad. Ammar Sami, the man who had lied about being with Fahad on the night Roa disappeared, was also in the crosshairs. Investigators knew he hadn't told them the whole truth, but was he simply covering for a friend, or had he played a more active role in Roa's fate? As forensic teams worked to confirm the remains were indeed Roa's, the police prepared for the next phase of their case. They had spent months piecing together every detail, tracking Fahad's movements, exposing his web of lies. Now, with Roa's body recovered, the final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Roa had been murdered, buried like a discarded secret, hidden away as if her killer had hoped she would be forgotten. But Roa would not be forgotten, and Fahad would not walk free much longer. The weight of evidence against him was crushing, and the moment investigators confirmed that the remains found in Big Creek belonged to Roa, there was nowhere left for him to hide. Law enforcement moved swiftly, ensuring that the man responsible for ending Roa's life would never have the chance to hurt anyone again. On May 18, 2017, Fahad Mohammed Saeed was indicted on an overwhelming list of charges, each one a reflection of the calculated cruelty he had inflicted upon Roa. This wasn't just a case of murder, it was a carefully orchestrated act of violence, layered with deception, manipulation, and utter disregard for human life. The charges stacked against him were staggering. 2 counts of aggravated murder. 2 counts of kidnapping. Felonious assault. Aggravated burglary. Violation of a protection order. Gross abuse of a corpse. 2 counts of theft. Telecommunications fraud. Tampering with evidence. Possession of criminal tools. It was a case that shook the community, a painful reminder that domestic violence is more than just bruises and threats. It can be a death sentence. Roa had done everything right. She had fought for her safety, secured a protection order, tried to build a future for herself and her son. But in the end, it hadn't been enough. Fahad had made sure of that. But he hadn't acted alone. Investigators turned their focus to Ammar Sami, Fahad's friend, the man who had lied to police, covered for his friend, and pretended he knew nothing about Roa's disappearance. At first, it wasn't clear how deeply he was involved. Was he just protecting a friend out of misplaced loyalty, or had he played a more active role in what happened to Roa? As authorities dug deeper, they uncovered inconsistencies in Amar's story. Surveillance footage had already exposed one of his biggest lies. His claim that he had been alone on the night Roa vanished was false. The evidence didn't stop there. Phone records placed both men in critical locations. Forensic data suggested that Amar wasn't just a passive bystander, he was complicit in covering up what had happened to Roa. He had helped dispose of the evidence. He had helped conceal the crime. And most damning of all, he had helped Fahad get away with it for months. For his role in obstructing the investigation, Amar Sami was charged with obstruction of justice. He had spent months thinking he could outsmart the police, but now the truth had caught up with him. As the case moved through the legal system, Roa's family sat through every moment of the proceedings, watching as the man who had stolen her life faced his reckoning. There was no remorse in Fahad's eyes, no guilt, no sadness. He had controlled Roa in life, and in death he refused to acknowledge the horror of what he had done. But the law saw him for what he was. The trial was harrowing. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture of a man who could not accept losing control. Fahad hadn't just wanted Roa gone, he wanted to erase her entirely. The evidence proved that he had planned her murder, researched how to dispose of a body, and executed his crime with chilling precision. But he had failed. He hadn't counted on Rosa's family refusing to give up. He hadn't counted on investigators relentlessly pursuing the truth. And he hadn't counted on justice catching up to him. In the end, Fahad was convicted. His fate was sealed, just as Roa's had been on that tragic night. He would never be a free man again. But no prison sentence, no matter how severe, could ever undo what he had done. Roa's son would grow up without his mother. Her family would never hear her voice again. Her friends would never see her smile or hear her talk about her dreams for the future. Her life had been stolen in the most brutal, heartless way imaginable. For those who loved her, justice was bittersweet. They had fought for this moment, demanded accountability, and won. But nothing could bring her back. Nothing could erase the pain. Roya was gone. But she would never be forgotten. Her story serves as a chilling reminder that abuse should never be ignored, that restraining orders are not always enough, and that when someone tells you they are in danger, believe them. If Roa's story has moved you, let her memory be a call to action. If you believe that no one should lose their life at the hands of a violent partner, subscribe to this channel. Only those who think abusers should be allowed to get away with murder won't subscribe.